Global Food Crisis, next on International Focus.
The Institute of World Affairs at UWM and Milwaukee Public Television present International Focus, a global magazine linking Wisconsin and the world.
Welcome to International Focus. I'm Robert Sigliano, Director of the Institute of World Affairs at UWM. A recent UN World Food Program report estimates that 100 million people worldwide now suffer from hunger due to the spike in the costs of basic foods. Noted economist and UN advisor Jeffrey Sachs has characterized the crisis as the worst of its kind in over 30 years. Analysts point to multiple causes for the run-up, including the loss of arable land, the removal of subsidies on staples like rice and wheat, and the diversion of food products to the biofuels industry. The crisis has sparked unrest in several nations, including Haiti, where thousands of angry citizens recently took to the streets to protest the government's economic policies, prompting the sacking of Haiti's prime minister. To help us explore the factors driving this growing global crisis, we're joined in the studio by Patrick Bellegarde-Smith, professor in the Department of Africology at UWM. He is a prolific author in a number of disciplines, including Haitian history, economics, politics, and culture. And Abdur Chowdhury, professor of economics at Marquette University. Dr. Chowdhury's extensive international experience includes positions in Bangkok, Nanjing, China, and the United Nations University in Helsinki. We're also joined by phone by Asma Lateef, director of the Bread for the World Institute, a Washington-based think tank providing policy analysis on hunger and strategies to end it. She previously served as a consultant for the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development and the International Labor Organization in Geneva. Welcome to International Focus, everyone. Asma Lateef, I wonder if we can start with you. And I guess the basic question I want to put is could you help to put in perspective what we mean when we say global crisis? What are you seeing on the ground in terms of the extent of the situation and its impact?
Well, thanks so much for having me on the show. Basically, prices have risen, food prices have risen about 83% over the last 2 years. And for poor people who spend between 60 and 80% of their income on food, this is really, taking on quite a drastic turn for them. They're spending a lot more now than they were just 2 years ago on food. And so, as you mentioned, the estimates are that about 100 million people have seen their food security situation worsen over the last 2 years. And so there's a very real impact. And I think the social unrest that we're seeing in all parts of the world, from Haiti all the way to East Asia, it just demonstrates how much of an impact this is having on poor people.
And so in people in whether it's Haiti or Afghanistan or Thailand or wherever, how are they coping with this? I mean, is there literally just the lack of, say, staples like rice in stores?
Yes, I think there is definitely a shortage. People are actually hoarding food. Governments have imposed restrictions on exports. All of this is limiting the availability of food to people. And so, I mean, on the most extreme levels, people are actually cutting back in terms of their diets and turning to less nutritious options and less expensive options. And the long-term consequences of that in terms of their own health and well-being will also be tremendous and have a bearing on development as we move forward.
And to what extent, or I suppose it's a bit of both, is the crisis being driven by just an absolute lack of food, of certain corn, wheat, rice, whatever it is, versus the inability to afford it because the prices have shot up so much?
I think it's definitely a combination of both. There have been a number of things that have led to a reduction in food supply. Australia, for example, has been going through a drought for over 10 years, and that has limited wheat exports from Australia. There's been a diversion of corn for biofuels, and so that has also had some impact on supply. But there's also growing demand for food. One of the sort of good news aspects of this, if you can call it that, is that, poor people around the world have seen an increase over the last 20, 30 years, increase in their standard of living, and in countries like China and India that have been doing relatively well, poor people are moving into the lower middle class and the middle class, and their diets are improving, and as a result there's an increase in demand for more nutritious foods and different types of food, including meat. And that, so you've got this added increase in the need for feed for cattle and meat production. And so all of those are placing pressure on supply. But I think the income side of it has to also factor into this. We're not in a situation currently where the world doesn't produce enough food. I think there is a danger of that in future if we don't prepare for it, but at the moment I think what you said about incomes and people being able to afford food is very important. I mean, we still have over 1 billion people who live on less than $1 a day, and for them, purchasing food is a challenge, and they are the ones who are being affected most dramatically by the 83% increase in food prices over the last 2 years. And so getting them the tools they need to improve their own livelihood so that in future they can purchase food is absolutely key.
And I suppose there are both long-term and obviously very short-term strategies for coping with the crisis. In the short term, I imagine organizations like the World Food Program are very important. The Secretary General of the UN has said they need to raise another $755 million to make up for a shortfall. How are we able to cope with this in the short term?
Absolutely. Food aid will be, and humanitarian assistance, cash assistance, both food aid and cash assistance will be central to, preventing a more dire impact of this food crisis. And, governments in donor countries really need to help the World Food Program meet its shortfall. That's a short-term impact. Over the long term, one has to look at raising incomes in poor communities around the world, and a major part of that is improving agricultural productivity in rural areas in the developing world. Poor people predominantly still live in rural areas, and so improving agricultural productivity where poor people live, improving their livelihoods and creating economic opportunities where they live is crucial to the long-term impact. So using U.S. development assistance will be to help improve agricultural productivity is a major part of that. But also, the trade distorting agricultural subsidies in our own farm bill, that is a huge disincentive for smallholder farmers to invest in their own land and around the world to invest in their own land, because we are undercutting the price that they could get, the fair price in the market. So both looking at our own agricultural subsidies and our own trade barriers, as well as helping invest in improving agricultural productivity through our development assistance, both are long-term solutions.
We've got about a minute left. Asma, I'm wondering if you could quantify for us a little bit, what's the downside? If we aren't able to stem this, at least in the short term, if not the long term, what's the downside for the international community and even the United States?
Well, over the last 30 years, we've made tremendous progress against poverty. just even if you measure it in terms of dollar a day poverty, the numbers have been improving tremendously. So one of the downsides is we really risk slipping back and seeing those numbers of poor people, and living on less than $1 a day, seeing those numbers rise again. And, accompanying poverty on such a massive scale, I mean, I think already tolerating 1 billion people who live on less than $1 a day is bad enough. But seeing increases in those numbers, has an impact on all of us, no matter where we live. Social unrest, the spread of diseases across borders, and things like that. So there are many sort of self-interested reasons why we should also be concerned if we allow this to run out of control.
Great. Well, Asma Lateef, Bread for the World Institute, thank you very much for joining us by phone. And to our viewers, we'll be back in just a moment after a short break on International Focus.
Thanks.
The Institute of World Affairs presents our community with a range of public programs relating to global issues, U.S. foreign policy, and the world economy. For more information about the Institute of World Affairs, call 414-229-3220 or visit our website at www.iwa.uwm.edu.
Welcome back to International Focus and our discussion of the global food crisis. We just heard from Asma Lateef of the Bread for the World Institute, and we're here in studio with Professors Patrick Bellegarde-Smith and Professor Abdur Chowdhury of Marquette University. And I'm wondering, gentlemen, if we can start, if you had any thoughts on what Asma said, but I want, Professor Chowdhury, I want to start with you about a little background here. I mean, this feels, if you're reading the newspaper, you're kind of a casual observer, it feels like a sudden crisis. How did we get to this position?
Yeah, in fact, Ms. Lateef did point out to some of the things, although it has hit the headlines in the last couple of months, but this rising price of food, this has been going on for the last at least 5-6 years. Since about 2000, we have seen this rising trend in prices. A number of factors have basically led to this. Some of them, this is basically a case where we can say that increasing demand has met limiting supply. One thing that Ms. Lateef pointed out is that what has happened, we have seen in a number of developing countries, like China, India in particular, because of that increased income, basically now they're able to buy more food. And at the same time, there has been a shift in the dietary taste. So they can afford meat, they can afford milk, which means a significant portion of the food has to go for feeding the cattle, for example. So that's one thing on the side. The other thing that Ms. Lateef pointed out, and I agree with her, is the issue of this biofuel. What has happened is, whether it's biofuel in the United States or biodiesel ethanol in Europe, basically a significant portion of land which could have been used for wheat production is now going into production in biofuel-related products. So we see a limiting supply there. Add to that a number of factors. This increase in oil price also have an indirect impact. It is raising the cost of production. Transport costs have gone up. Input prices, seeds, fertilizer cost has gone up. So that is also playing a role. And then there are certain other factors which I would say more short-term is speculation in commodity price. Okay, that is playing a role. And also, Ms. Lateef talked about the poor weather. Drought in Australia, that has cut into wheat production. And as a response to the crisis, what a number of countries have done, India, Ukraine, for example, China to a little extent, they have cut down exports of food crop in the international market. So that has made the international market smaller. Now, Ukraine last week has sort of reversed that, but, that has also played a role. So these factors have combined to lead to this increase in price that we see right now.
So it's certainly not the all of a sudden kind of
no, I would say it has been building up for the last couple of years.
And Professor Bellegarde-Smith, I wonder if we could go a little bit now to the situation in a country like Haiti, and again, Ms. Lateef did talk a little bit about sort of what people are doing to deal with this crisis on a day-to-day basis. But so we hear sort of the macroeconomic trends that have led us to this, but so how does it affect people in a country like Haiti?
Well, Haiti is one of the poorest countries in the world, certainly, and we have conditions in the country itself that have not been conducive to increase food production inside the country for all kinds of reasons. And those are connected to the international environment as well. And so when we have a cold elsewhere, Haiti catches pneumonia. It is almost automatically that it occurs that way. And you're talking in terms of a population of 9 million people. Half of that population lives on about $1 a day, more or less. And now a small can of rice, and rice is the basic food in the country, costs $1 a day. $1 per can. And so it has become a situation which is untenable.
So basically, the equivalent here would be you took your daily household income, might be several $1,000s for a typical house, or $1,000 or whatever. That buys just one bit of food, one food product.
That's right. It buys one food product. It does not buy the oil to cook it. It does not buy the kidney beans that you mix with the rice to give you a complete protein. That's a national dish. We eat it almost every day. We have rice every day. And even after 42 years in the United States, I still need my rice several times a week. And so it has become critical. The government, the Prime Minister has had a vote of no confidence in the Parliament, so the Senate has voted against him, the House of Deputies. He's had to leave. And we just had somebody named as Prime Minister. He has not been approved yet by the Parliament. The interesting thing is he's an agronomist. And the president himself, President Préval, has said something interesting. He said, well, I understand your pain. I understand what you're going through. Come get me in the palace. I'll protest with you. But he does these things. And of course they came and they were attempting to get into the palace. He should not have said that. But he said, look, it will take us years to rebuild the rice industry in the country, and it was destroyed essentially by the introduction of cheap U.S. rice, which is no longer cheap. In fact, pretty much all the food that comes from Haiti comes from two sources, the United States and the Dominican Republic next door. And once upon a time, we were pretty much self-sufficient in foodstuff. In the 19th century, and certainly 50 years ago when I was growing up in that country. And so it has gotten critical. Now, what Haitians have done, which is surprising to most people, they have gone to the big items. They say we want structural change in the country. They're starving to death, and they're still demanding structural change. They want, of course, a lessening of the burden in terms of rice production and beans and oil and cooking fuel and that kind of thing. But they also say we have to reorganize the agricultural sector. We need to bring protectionism back. And the president said we can't do that because the international conditions will not allow us to go back into heavy-duty protectionism.
Well, this goes back to the macroeconomic picture then. So if a lot of the trends in this macroeconomy led to the underlying causes here in terms of the lack of rice production and the food dependency of a country like Haiti, but then dealing with it will also bump into trends in the international economic community, correct?
Exactly. In fact, Ms. Lateef just hinted to one point like this issue of Farm Bill. What is happening in international trade is now this stalemate that is going on between the developed and the developing nations regarding agricultural trade, the subsidy that United States and Europe are giving to its farmers. Now, in development literature, we have this saying that, it's better to be a cow in Europe than a farmer in Africa. A cow in Europe is subsidized $2 a day, but half the population in Africa lives at less than $2 a day. So the point is that this market distorting subsidies need to be removed. Okay, now, I know that within the United States there's a strong sentiment in favor of doing this, just that, in the international negotiation that is now going on in Geneva, the Doha round, which, we talk about a lot, the negotiation is now, United States is thinking of giving it up, but the question is what will they get in return? So that's where the diplomacy is going on. But I do think that, relating to what Professor Smith said, agricultural subsidy has to go down, in the United States and Europe.
Well, we've a few years ago, I think it was another point when the subsidies came up in the Doha round and the Europeans and the Americans being pressed to get rid of them, And the argument being made was that they were suppressing the world price for these basic commodities, which was meaning that farmers in developing countries weren't able to earn a living, whether it was a start in Haiti or to the farmers in Zimbabwe or other places. And now we have this high food cost, which I assume means high cost for some of these basic commodities, but it's now a bad thing. So how do we work this?
Yeah, basically what has happened is the issue of agricultural subsidy came up because it was sort of the farmers, the developing countries couldn't compete with the subsidized farm from here. Now what has happened is because of the increased demand, because the reasons that we talked about, the prices have gone up to some extent. But the supply is not increasing from the developing countries, for example, because they are finding it not as profitable as to produce. So so basically that's one of the reasons we see this increased price.
So in Haiti, how?
Well, the short-term effect is that people are starving, and they have gone back to something they've been doing in moments of crisis, which is doing mud patties. That's what people eat now in the slums. They take some dirt next to them, they put a little oil in it, a little salt, and they bake it in the sun, and that's what kids are eating now. It has absolutely zero nutritional value, but that's what's happening. So we can expect some hardships to last into the near future. Long run, of course, and it's going to be difficult in terms of the environment and the what has happened to the country itself. And it's relatively small. It's highly mountainous, more so than Switzerland. And so there is a lack of land, arable land, would be to make the country self-sufficient in food as it used to be. But it's going to be difficult, if not impossible. But certainly in terms of economic resources, to the extent that Haiti has them, it has to be spent abroad on things that it cannot produce. And it's kind of silly to bring in plantain, bananas, rice, corn, and those kinds of things when the country used to produce these things. But now the United Nations has come to the rescue. Brazil has come to the rescue. Venezuela has sent 250 tons of food to Haiti, including beef. I don't know why beef. Haitians are not used to it. Cuba has come to the rescue. So it's helping a bit. But it's not responding to a long-range plan, and Haitians have said, quite frankly, we need structural change. And people in the streets have said that, which is very interesting.
We're coming. We've got just a few minutes left, and probably too late to be asking now about. So how do we get out of this situation? And you both have talked about the seeds of doing that, but I'm wondering if we could talk some little bit of time at what, both in the short term, but more importantly in the long term, and what can countries like the U.S. do, especially in this?
Sure. Basically, the irony of this whole situation is that in the last couple of years, we did make some progress in sort of reducing poverty across the world to some extent. Now, this food crisis is rolling back that progress. We are going back a decade. United Nations had its Millennium Development Goal by which they wanted to halve world poverty by 2015. Now, it's a big question whether we can achieve that. Now, what can be done? There are certain things that needs to be done short term, immediately. Just this morning, the international community has come up with, as you said, $755. So, $755 million. So, in the short run, the social safety net needs to be sort of expanded. A food for work program.
And I imagine that this means in a place like Haiti, you've got to go to the places where people are eating these mud patties.
Exactly. Because you're also talking about political upheaval of major proportion. And in the medium range, we're talking about both people coming to the United States. And I'm sure the U.S. does not want to see this. But it's probably coming. So that's the medium term.
Exactly. Yeah, and then going to the medium term, basically, as Ms. Lateef pointed out earlier, agricultural productivity has to be increased. Okay? There has to be. This is something that developing countries have to come forward with the help of the donors. Obviously, they cannot do it all on their own. But the developing countries have to invest more in agricultural research, increasing productivity, developing rural infrastructure, giving market access to the small farmers. So these are some of the things that would be long-term proposal that countries can look at. And what can the U.S. do and the developed countries can do? Obviously, something that I mentioned before, this agricultural subsidy, the trade distorting issues that needs to be resolved as soon as possible.
And in Haiti, they've called for, say, structural adjustments. And I imagine whether it's a government in Haiti or other governments, there's some really fundamental trade-offs they have to make here.
Yes, they have to. And it's really interesting because, under isolation more than about 200 years ago, in the first decade of the 19th century, Haiti was absolutely self-sufficient in food production. And also it had the highest standard of living in Latin America right after the United States, the peasantry itself. That was right after slavery was abolished and the country became independent. But obviously we're not going to a situation where autarky can reign. That's not going to happen. Haiti, as all the other countries of the Caribbean, are very much tied to the international system, and they've always been tied to it. So the solutions have to be pretty much global for us.
We've got less than a minute left. What role do you see for the political leadership now in the U.S.? What can they be doing now?
My first suggestion would be obviously to help the international community with this. They have come up with this call for $755 million, whatever the U.S. can do to share. And then in the longer term, to have this farm bill, to take a look at this farm bill one more time, and then see how we can contribute to increasing production and also helping supply from the developing countries.
And this is something that people here in Wisconsin, where farming is very big, are going to have to grapple with. So it's also a state-local issue as well.
Exactly. That's a big challenge for the U.S. farmers here, too.
Well, Professor Abdur Chowdhury and Professor Patrick Bellegarde-Smith, thank you very much for being with us. To our guests, to our viewers, we'll see you next week on International Focus.
For information about the Institute of World Affairs and its many programs, or to become a member of the Institute, call 414-229-3220 or visit us at our website,